Sappington. I'm actually a teacher by trade. At the very early age, I learned that my passion was children. So I did a lot of hands-on kinds of activities. Using my ability to draw, using my ability to create things in 3-dimension, that was the way I talked. It was my language. As a child, I had problems in school because I had issues with reading. So to be a traditional teacher, that was not really something I could do. My eyes don't work properly, and so being able to be a fluent reader was a real struggle. And that has actually been a huge motivator for me to use the arts as my language. Oral, storytelling, music, drawing, they're really the stability of my life. When I went to school, I knew I wanted to teach, and the only way to do that was through a teaching program. And I excelled in everything but the regular courses that you had to take, like history and writing and things like that. They were just very difficult. The humanities, believe it or not, were very difficult for me. But I still made it through, and I soared at the practicums in college, and I went out into the world to become a teacher. And when I was teaching, everybody expects you to be academic because you're a teacher. And that just wasn't my forte. What my forte was to communicate with the children and help them get from point A to point B because I could read them well. And so I stayed with the younger children because I didn't have to have that academic excellence in the way I proceeded in my teaching. So I was teaching young children, and I'd bring in sciences, and I'd bring in the art, and I'd bring in the storytelling. And you could just see the light, the eyes of the children become big and bright and curious. And I loved bringing nature to them, looking at the beauty of a snowflake, looking at the minuscule pieces that made up rocks, looking at the trees and watching the leaves change colors in the fall, looking at the details of the flowers and how the petals of a daisy were so much different from the petals of a rose, and how color wasn't always stable throughout one petal, that you'd go from darks to lights or lights to darks. And I realized that that's all art. It's the observation of the art world. I wasn't very successful in the academic teaching of the classroom, but I was very successful with preschool. I had to rethink how I wanted to teach because I still knew I was a good teacher. So I went to a master's program at Lesley University, and I got a master's in creative arts and learning. And I developed my art vocabulary to help move myself forward. But in doing so, I learned that I have a lot of fun with crafts and using unusual things to create beauty. The first thing I did was I made books. And the books I made were for the children who struggled with reading. I would do things like things I can do. And it would encourage children to see that even though reading might have been a struggle for them, they could do lots of different things. And so I would use my photographs to encourage them to be able to bring language to what they do. So that was one use of my art, my photography, to encourage a child to learn and have good self-esteem. Then I would do a book that was really crazy, but they were the main character. And so I would again use photographs of the children and then do crazy art in the computer and make sure that the storyline was a simple storyline. But so the children were part of the story that I would create. And the story itself would be a creation. I had one child, he happens to be my nephew, and he became, and I drew these stories and these images. So the story became about him, and this is him. This is James, and he and his cousin would play pirates, and so I used things that were in his life, like they used to love to eat pirate's booty, which is a kind of a cheese puff. And so they caught crocodiles with, or the crocodiles were attacking their boat, and so the pirate's booty distracted the crocodiles so they could get away. Stuff like that. So that was, so that's how the story started. This was one of the books that I wrote. It is a puppet book. And it talks about how the zebra survives in the savannah. And so I did the illustrations, I did the storyline, and it's really fun because it's three-dimensional and the kids just got into being able to see the animal. This one is a storybook where I created characters out of crayons. Each character has its own name, and again, I drew these images, and so the black crayon is Black Jack, and he's a card. Well, that tells you that he's funny, you know, and I explain all of that in here. And so we have Shy Vi and True Blue. So True Blue's a good friend, and Mellow Yellow, and so forth and so on. The children really liked that, and so we decided to make a series. My second book was called One Rainy Day. In this book, it starts out as a gloomy, rainy day, and as the crayon characters come into the story, they start adding color to the day. And by the end of the story, the picture just becomes, it becomes a sunny day. And then there was one added crayon added to the story, which was gold. And he was bold gold. So right now, what is really exciting to me is my nephews and I together are writing the third story about the crayons. It's a travel into space. We've only got about half of it done, but they have started adding to that creative piece. And the crayons have made a spaceship, gone into space, and they're visiting all the planets. The Mercury is the gray planet, and it's made of clay, and there's all different adventures there. And then they go to Venus, and it's the yellow planet, and it has lemonade lakes, and so forth and so on. It's so fun having their input. I love the share of the creativity that I can instigate with the children. I think it's just really exciting. So those are my books. Then I loved doing the photography so much that I decided to try and figure out a way to use my photographs to an extent that would be useful. So many people can go out and take photos now with the cameras, with the cell phones, that a lot of people don't go out and buy too many photographs anymore. I mean, they really have to be pretty spectacular for that to happen. I have pretty good photographs, so I decided to make cards. And so I do these decorative cards using my photographs. I have, you know, the lighthouse, and these are pansies or that type. Or I might do ducks. And this one, I actually made that happen by putting the rock in the water and having it going over the leaf. And so you know, it's just different things like this. Now my husband is an artist, and so I've used one of his watercolors. I photographed his watercolor and then made it into a card. So that's my cards that I make. I was working with a family who had a son in high school, early high school, and he was having difficulty in school. And he's a smart kid, really, really smart child, really good with his hands. So I tried to figure out a way to engage him in using his hands in a productive way and try and keep him out of trouble, is basically what I was trying to do. I love going to like antique stores and finding interesting and weird things. One of the things I did was I took him to an antique place and said, let's just look and see what might be interesting and see if we can find a creative way to put it together. You know, to use the different things you find to put together. What we found were telephone bells, old telephone bells. And then we found some hinges, and we found some crystals. We brought them home and we started trying to figure out what we could do with them. I'm very involved in my church, and I figured that maybe he could create some stuff that could go in our church fair that he could sell. He never really got that to finality. However, with that conversation and with the way that we started, I ended up making chimes. And so these are the telephone bells. And this is a pulley that I used as the top. And then this was just a piece of hardware and a necklace. And so that is one of the chimes I've made. To connect it, I used coated paper clips. And so that's one of the chimes I've made. And then I found a bunch of sheep bells. Very different sounding. I used opera glasses as the top. And this is a slice of a geode. So that was different. And so I got challenged to find different bells that would be different, made from different things. So I'd go out and I'd take anything that looked like a bell, and it was my challenge to find interesting bells or interesting tops to hang them from. So this was probably one of my more creative chimes. And they do, when they hit, the oarlock actually does have a ring to it. And so this one was based on fishing, and we had the reel, and this was a pin, the sheep, and then of course the float and the oars. So it does have a ring, but if that was one of the most interesting ones I did. And then the last set of pieces I did, which you've got your brass bells from India, and then this is a brooch as a top. And then again, just a small piece. This is just to catch the wind so that it'll actually work. So I did those for a while. So I'm always looking for interesting little crafts to do. And so I was at a funeral one time, and there were two children there. And of course, I'm attracted to children. So they were having their family picture taken, and the children were holding something in their hand. I was like, what the heck is that? And it turns out that it was a cork, and they had made a little character out of it. And I was just very intrigued by that. And so I came home and I found some corks, and I started playing around with them. I came home and I created little characters. And this would be a worker. The hat is actually created from a plastic measuring teaspoon. This guy has not only the stop, but he can also say slow. And again, I'm using the paper clips, the colored paper clips. Then I did one like this. And he's just sort of laid back. And the hat was actually done with yarn that was braided. Then I tried using bigger beads. And then a friend came over and said, can I try making one? And I said, sure. And he made a jester. I liked it so much, I decided to make my own jester. And then my nephews came and they wanted to make one, and one of them wanted to make a dragon. I thought that was such a cool idea that I made my own dragon. Then I got a little bit more complex. And I made a guy making a s'more. And then I made a clown. Now the clown's pretty interesting because the balloons, I didn't know exactly how to do the balloons. So the balloons are actually made with gumballs. And then I thought, well, kids might like these too. They're really not toys, but that's my little basketball player.
Have you thought of doing diaporamas with your characters?
That Tim would love me, and my husband would love me to do that. I haven't done that. I went on a little bit different avenue with this, in that these little characters, I made one and I took it into my minister, and he happened to have had a really bad day that day. And about 2 days later, he called me up and he said, you know, that little character you brought in really made my day that day. Would you be interested in creating a ministry with them? So at this point, between the people that we know that have just walked through our house and the church, about 150 of these have gone out into the world. And we call it the Corky. This is a Corky ministry. And it is to remind people that they're never alone. And if they have faith in God, that God's always with them. And they're just a symbol of that. And so that's really that's my piece of of Corky, and I usually have a journal that goes with them, and the journal just states, "You are never alone. We share your joys. We care about your struggles. We know your importance to God's world. Let us know things that that happen in your life." So, and then I write down things that have worked out really well, ways that I see good in life. And I think that there's just not enough of that in the world.
How can people from other places can find your character, your Corkies, your wind chimes?
I have a Instagram, and it's Corkies, Corkies, period, and period, Quirky, Quirky, period, stuff, Stuff. And that's on Instagram.
And they can order the books as well?
I guess so. I mean, I publish them myself, so they're simple. But yeah, if they wanted to, I don't have any of those online. I don't show any of them.
There are a lot of parents who have children with learning challenges. There are autistic children who very much connect to this kind of learning tools, learning aids. Have you thought of being a special education teacher?
I've actually taught Title I, and I did reading recovery for 12 years. Well, actually, I did Title I and Title II for 12 years. And I found that was really wonderful work for me. I enjoyed it tremendously. I have books that children have written with me a lot. Yeah. Yeah. I've been retired for a while, but that is a love.
What would you recommend to a parent who is trying to help their child to find their own way to comprehend, grasp the world around them?
It's so individual. And it's hard for me to say specifically without knowing a child. However, the parents do know their children. All they have to do is watch. What is it that the child is attracted to? And with whatever they're attracted to, try and make that a tool. If a child really notices the sounds of life, then bring those sounds into their learning. So like, say they're having a hard time with vocabulary, learning vocabulary, but they love music. Music is just something that they absolutely adore. Then sing words to them. Don't just say them, sing them. If sounds are something that are really, or even they're reactive to, then you can bring words or vocabulary into that as well. Ooh, that's a bang. That's a bang. Or so when they're reacting, give them the words that go along with that. Children who are active, encourage that. With this child was 2 years old when I wrote this book, and his book was 20 pages long. And it's all about him, so he's going to be interested in looking at the book. Just celebrate the things that the children are doing. In the beginning, stories should always be in stuff that the children are not noticing, not just the things that you're noticing. I mean, you can bring that into it, but always bring it into it with them in mind. Individual.
You are the wife, assistant, associate. You are instrumental in helping your husband, who is an architect, an artist, a designer. That must be a huge responsibility for you, because you oversaw everything, you organized everything. How was that for you?
I enjoy being able to support him. There's no doubt about that. It just, every once in a while, the two of us are so busy. It's very rare for us to just sit still and do nothing. Very rare for both of us. And so finding the time to do everything and doing it the way that is most powerful, it sometimes gets it's difficult. It's difficult, but we do it. We work together and we get those things done. One of my favorite verses from the Bible is, everything is possible with God. Without my faith, I would not have been able to go through most of the